everybody. Welcome back to another edition of AI Diatribe. I am Jason Lowe, your host, and I am joined by my co-host, Matt Conweiser of IBM. Say hi, Matt.
Hello, Matt.
Boy, it's going to be a fun one today. And we have the pleasure today of being joined by Milton Pedraza, who is currently the CEO of the Luxury Institute, but he is also, quite importantly, a private investor that has much to do with digital rights and a few other things. I think maybe it might be better, Milton, if I just go ahead and turn it to you and let you give us the elevator pitch on what it is that you're doing and what you're involved in right now.
Okay, terrific. So thank you. I appreciate being here. I started my career in the corporate world, worked for major multinationals in consumer goods, started with Philip Morris, didn't like cigarettes, moved to Pepsi Cola, okay, sugared water, then went to Colgate Palmolive, more virtuous toothpaste and pet food, traveled around the world, became an expat, lived in 10 different countries, went to about 130 countries for work. And then 23 years ago, I decided to start the Luxury Institute because I thought the luxury industry lacked research, the voice of the high net worth and the ultra high net worth client. It lacked training. It was very transactional and not very relationship minded. And so for 23 years, we'd worked with over 1,100 luxury goods and services brands, all kinds of companies, aviation, medical, anything that touches the wealthy. And then as a side hobby, I also invest in startups related to digital rights, startups that try to help you take control of your digital identity through encryption, zero knowledge proofs, startups that help you, like people like Shakira, take control of their digital data, all the data she has on social media, and take control of it, monetize it. And then other companies that try to help you get control of your identity, your digital identity. For example, Shakira does not own her fan club, Universal Music does. So try to empower creators. I call it creator empowerment technology. And in the sum of doing all of that, well, I also try to travel a lot. I've been, as I said, to 130 countries. Most of them were for business, but now I travel a lot more for fun.
Isn't that funny how that always works out? You're a business traveler and everybody says, oh, it's so great that you get to go everywhere. And you're like, do you know that I land and 45 minutes later, I'm in my first meeting and I'm in meetings until an hour before I fly out? It just happens to be that way. I'm sure that of those 130 countries, you would love to go back and see a lot of them non-business travel wise. So that's why you're doing that, right?
Yes, but I will tell you this. There's a greater depth of knowing a culture when you're doing business in that culture.
Fair.
So in that sense, it was very helpful. And it was helpful to live in 7 different countries.
Wow. Okay. Well, and I know that Matt has like a list of questions about this long ready to ask because we're going to talk a lot about AI and the effect it has on digital rights and a variety of other things. Before we do that, I want to hear what the 7 countries are that you lived in so that we can have some common ground to talk about here.
Well, I'll name the cities. I lived in London for about a year. I lived in Rome for about a year, in Paris for about a year. I lived in Bucharest for about 2 years. I lived in Prague for 2 years. I lived in Caracas, Venezuela. And what's the last one? Jesus. Oh, in Bratislava, which is in Slovakia. I was working for multinationals running different countries, and that's how I got there. It was fun. A lot of fun.
And your favorite of those to live in, what was your favorite city?
I think
you're not on record here. None of them are going to like look on this and get all mad because you dissed them.
No, but I mean, it has to be Paris. There's nothing like it, really, right? The history, the people, the food, the joie de vivre, as they say, is real. And so very enjoyable, a little hard to navigate through the services and plumbers and all that. But other than that, it was bliss.
So, you know, they say about Paris that you really have to speak French to get along well with the Parisians. Is that true?
Well, every time you try to speak French as a foreigner, they start speaking English. And they, it's sort of like, seriously, we will talk in English for you because clearly you do not speak good French. So yes, I speak several languages and some of it is French. But if you want to get along well with French people, let them speak the English. Honor their English. Everything will go well.
Good tips. I know in Brazil, most people don't speak English And if you make an effort to speak Portuguese, even if your accent is horrible, they love it. They
Yes.
absolutely appreciate that you've made that effort. The same thing in Asia, by the way. When they meet an
Yes.
American
Yes.
and the American tries even just as a phrase or a greeting in a local language, they absolutely adore it. And they will speak English to you, but they will very much appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I was born in Colombia and I came when I was a very little boy. And my mother taught me Italian, and then I had a French girlfriend. It was very easy to learn. And then when I went to Romania, it's probably the language that's closest to pure Latin. So it's very sophisticated language, very easy to learn. But when you go to the Slavic languages, you're totally lost. At least I was.
Yeah, very fundamentally different and grammatically different there for
Yes,
sure. And it's so
complex.
interesting, artificial intelligence, the effect it's having on language translation right now, because goodness gracious, it's much easier to type something into ChatGPT and you get a much more functional translation than, I hate to say it, I used to use Google Translate all the time. I don't use it anymore. I just use
Yeah,
ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that. Are you in the same spot? I mean, yes, you speak a lot of different languages, but are
yeah.
you
No,
using AI for translation?
use AI for translation. I use AI for so many things. And I feel sorry for translators. In 2019, I was in China and I was training. And so there were two translators there who had worked at the United Nations, et cetera. And I don't think they get that much work these days. Certainly on certain levels they do, because they do need a level of sophistication. Maybe they need to know political jargon, nomenclature. They need to know maybe a very specific domain. But for the simple translations, I think AI works pretty well, I have to say.
So, Jason brought us the bridge to AI. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm going to say you and I actually met via LinkedIn. We were mutual admiration society members, and we were enjoying each other's content quite a lot. And you taught me some terms that you mentioned again very briefly in your introduction. And I just want to, since we do a little bit of business audience, consumer audience, a little bit of everybody, you mentioned two terms that I think probably most people don't understand what they are. You said high net worth and ultra high net worth people. So just as a very quick little teaser, can you explain what that means to everybody?
Yes, and I will say that there's different definitions, but let's
Okay.
go with Capgemini's definition, which is if you have over $2 million in investable assets, that is beyond your home and other assets like your car, your high net worth, and everything up to 30 million in investable assets is, now why 30 million? No clue. But up to 30 million investable assets, your high net worth. And beyond that, your ultra high net worth. But I think, there's a great distinction between a billionaire, a centimillionaire, and a multimillionaire, and what I would call a mere millionaire. And then the affluent, who are perhaps usually young, but maybe have $500,000 income in a New York or LA working at a bank or at a hedge fund. So there's lots of distinctions, but those are the definitions: high net worth, ultra high net worth. Obviously, ultra implies the higher level of wealth and a different perspective on life.
Fair. And it also occurred to me as you were telling us your career arc that you went from probably a bad habit company, smoking, to a company that most people went to when they tried to give up smoking, which is drinking soda, to a company that profited from both of them, which is teeth cleaning. I'm just wondering if that was intentional, or, I mean, tell me a little bit about that. Were you kind of engineering the need for each one after the other?
There's luck and skill in life. They say life is like poker. It's not like roulette, which is 100% luck. It's not like chess, which is almost 100% skill. It's like poker, 50-50. So I was in New York. I was looking for a job, and I literally went at 3 a.m. to line up to get the interviews in college. And Philip Morris was one of the companies, and it was for finance, and they wanted someone who spoke Spanish. And so it was 1980. There was a recession going on, and I felt very lucky to get that job. I learned a tremendous amount, but it was an industry that clearly at the time was probably not as maligned as it was subsequent to that. And in fact, I got to know some of the people whose family owned those companies, and they were great people. But they just happened to sell a product that was absolute poison. And so, in fact, they used to give us a carton of cigarettes every Friday. And the majority of us would go sell it to the vendor right around the corner to get a little cash out of it. I was very young. I was 22 years old. And then I
That's
went to
amazing.
Pepsi because they wanted someone to do work in Asia and internationally, and I wanted to see the world. And Pepsi was supposed to be the Marine Corps of the consumer goods, like beyond Procter, beyond Coke. It was a rough and tough place, but you really learned. So I went there to learn my finance, travel again all over the world, this time Asia. And then finally I got to Colgate through a recommendation. So it was serendipity, but it was all concentrated in the consumer goods industry, multinationals, because I was dying to see the world on somebody else's dime. I could never have afforded to do that otherwise. So mea culpa, but it turned out okay.
I love it. And since I knew we were going to be talking about consumer product today, I wanted to let you know I have my Harry Potter mug because I'm fully bought into consumerism, and I
Wonderful.
have my Gap and Star Wars mashup shirt
Wow.
that my wife got me because I love Star Wars and she found it at the Gap. So here I am. I'm all consumer branded out here for you.
Thank you. But you know, Matt, the irony of life is that today I don't really, you won't see any paintings on my office. I'm really a minimalist. And so that's the irony of life, that as you get older, you just like material things. You're grateful for the financial security and what it allows you to do. But other than travel and help the people I love, the money doesn't really do anything for me other than gratitude, right? For this financial security. So that's the irony of being in the luxury industry and not wanting to really consume that much.
So, Milton, I have a question for you. So,
Please.
let's bring this back to artificial intelligence, because this is AI Diatribe, and we do need to try and dive into a little bit of the effect that AI is having on the world. And we're going to get into digital rights for sure. But I have a question that's been burning in my mind since you've been talking about high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals.
Yes.
It's really interesting that the advent of AI is going to cause, and I don't believe that this is theoretical. I think this is probably pretty much what everybody feels is really going to happen, that efficiencies born of innovation due to the utilization of artificial intelligence and the reduction of cost of goods and the reduction of cost of manufacturing, all of these things could possibly start bringing prices down very rapidly. Now, this is going to obviously be offset by something that is a little worrisome, which is going to be effect in the labor market, where unemployment could be widespread because of changes in the job force, changes in job requirements. Who knows that humanity is going to be able to keep up with economic creative destruction, because that's just going to cause chaos all over the place. And yet, we're reaching a time that is in our vision of luxuries being much more available to people because of a reduction of cost of these items. So my question for you is this: what's going to be the differentiator between people when it comes to status, when everybody has access to the same stuff a lot more easily?
Okay. First of all, I think they'll have access to the staples. I don't think everybody's going to be able to buy a private jet. I don't think everybody's going to own a mega yacht.
Are
I
you
may not
really
want
trying to hurt my feelings here? Because here I was just banking on the jet and the yacht, and if you're saying that's
Sorry.
not going to happen, I'm going to cry.
So I think, unfortunately, and I say that in all sincerity, there has always been inequality and there will always be inequality. But I think that one of the things that I learned is that wealthy people have subsidized a great deal of the innovation that has benefited the world. Sometimes it hasn't, okay? But so, for example, right now, wealthy individuals are funding the full body scans. They're funding the blood tests that give you 50 markers for cancer. They are funding all kinds of crazy ideas on genetics. So what I believe, and I'll address the unemployment effect. What I believe is that, and by the way, they even, a lot of innovation came, stupid little innovations like Louis Vuitton invented the stackable trunk. Now that sounds stupid today, but in the age of ship travel, it was a great invention. The waterproof watch was invented by Rolex. The crash dummies that were used by Mercedes helped to innovate a lot more safety standards. And as you can see, a lot of luxury cars start out with very high-end features and benefits that are safety oriented, and they cascade down and they become cheap and available to everyone. That doesn't mean that it's nirvana out there, but that means that there is a tremendous amount of investment that wealthy people make that isn't just about being benefactors and philanthropists, although they are that too. Look at Mackenzie Bezos. But that investment tends to pay off. And I believe that AI will pay off a tremendous amount. And we can get into all the ways that it will do that, because I think it'll be a lot of fun to talk about that. But I think that AI is not going to it's going to dislocate jobs, no question about it. But the best example that I was thinking about and having a conversation the other day with somebody was that even though, they talk about diagnosing, diseases through MRIs and scans, and, we're going to put people out of a job. But reality is we haven't lost all the people who analyze that, right? All the, what do you call them? Now I can't remember.
The radiologists?
Radiologists, thank you. But what I believe is that what AI will do is open it up to the other 8 billion people that do not ever get the MRIs and the scans and all the things that we get. And God knows they need all that, right? So to me, what AI should do is make scans so easy and so scalable that everybody who needs it is going to get one. And we know we're not going to run out of runway on scans for a long, long time. And we're not going to run out of childcare or nursing or many jobs that are caring jobs. There is such a dire need for so many of those jobs. Teachers. So I'll give you an example. There's a company that I will potentially train called Fusion Academy. They have 1-to-1 teacher to child ratio in teaching. Fusion Academy. And why does that even exist? Because there are people with very special needs. And some of those needs are, mental challenges. And other needs are that I am an acrobat, that I am an entertainer, that I am an athlete, that I am a whatever. So I need that kind of, flexible scheduling. To me, that could scale as well. Whereas teachers have a much lower student to teacher ratio, and that can dramatically improve the learning opportunities. So I think that we can reconfigure many, many careers that will allow people to earn a great living and will create tremendous value. And yes, the AI will be the foundational piece, but the human element will be what really makes it work and special and retains that human connection and that humanity that we all need. We all crave humanity. Loneliness is probably one of the greatest diseases. And by the way, the wealthy are not immune to that. So I have a very optimistic perspective on what AI is going to do. Do I think it's going to be a straight line to paradise? No. There's going to be dislocations. But I think that ultimately there are so many problems to solve on this planet that are completely ignored. We'll figure out how to employ people in those jobs.
But here's a question for you, because
Please.
we all know the destination, and no, it's not going to be a straight line getting from point A to point B. We are going to have disruptions. We are going to have things that are going to cause some issues socioeconomically. One of those that tends to be on the mind of individuals from the outside looking in, and even those from the inside looking in, is worry about the consolidation of the means of production, because artificial intelligence becomes so important that if it's utilized as much as it is, and with the advent of robotics and Tesla Robotics, Boston Dynamics, Figure Robotics, all of these different companies that are working here within the United States, we could see a great consolidation of wealth and the means of production at a scale that we have not seen since the railroad barons many years ago. And so many worry about what is the effect that that's going to have on wealth distribution or even wealth redistribution. Is this a valid concern? Do we need to concern ourselves with the fact that very much the wealth and the power of the world is going to be concentrated on a very select few?
Well, don't you think that's happening now and has been going on for decades? Did you really need AI to trigger that?
Well, I didn't want to point it out, but
Okay, there you go. So I would say yes. And I think, I lived in Venezuela and I saw a country full of a few wealthy people and lots of poor people. And that's why they elected Chavez and trusted this individual, a former army colonel who had already tried a coup and was in jail and was released by the then president, Caldera, who knows why, to wreak havoc upon his country, all in the name of equality. So, and I think you go country by country and you will see that inequality is tremendous. So we're not going to get into all the moral and stuff. But what I really believe is that, because I believe in chaos theory and complexity theory, systems cannot go at that disequilibrium for too long. And then revolution happens. Wealthy people are extremely aware of that. And there are a lot of wealthy people who would very willingly be taxed or have another way. And by the way, a way that preserves dignity, not universal income that takes away your dignity, but to find a way to pay your taxes fairly so that you can fund society, But I don't think that in other words, I don't think a welfare system is what's going to help. It's finding ways to employ people in new work that pays a decent wage. Maybe we start paying teachers more, babysitters more. I remember a very wealthy person saying that we give our most precious possessions, our children, to people, mostly women, whom we treat like absolute crap, right? In terms of payment, in terms of scheduling, in terms of many things. So I think that there will be somewhere in the midst of all this AI proliferation, we're going to make some realizations about many things, about data. For example, one of my wonderful ideas is that, and it's not my original idea, but it's one that I have with several colleagues, is that you should be getting paid for your data. So my location data, everybody wants my location data. So why don't I take control of it? Let's say through a fiduciary like Apple or some other data fiduciary. And if you, Wendy's, Burger King, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, blah, 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 Popeyes, you want my location? Awesome. You pay me for that. Okay. $20 a
So,
year.
you talk about location, and location is right at the center of something that matters a lot to me, and that's ethics and trust. When I get that little notification from an app or from an operating system or from a service provider that says, "Is it okay if this uses your location?" I always say no.
Me too.
And now keep in mind, I've not mentioned this in any of the other sessions I've done, but I used to do cellular network design, the old cellular packet data networks, pre 3G. And if you have a cell phone on the network, the carriers know exactly where you are. They can pinpoint you within a couple 100 feet of any active location at any time just through that. It's kind of like a false sense of security to say, no, don't track me, because if they need to, they can find you anyway.
Correct.
And I'm not leaking sensitive information. So,
and you may want to be tracked, because if you're in an emergency, you'd like someone to come and help you.
yeah,
So there are good
actually,
ways, right?
a good friend of mine sponsored Carrie's Law and got it passed because Carrie's Law was a woman who was in a hotel and couldn't get emergency services when she was being attacked because the hotel didn't have direct 911. And so he was able to work with her father and get that passed through Congress and signed into law. And he has since been championing E911, which allows for location services to get coupled with a 911 call and text-based 911, chat 911, all these other services to make sure that that is available when people need it.
Okay.
But here's my question. When you talk about consumer products and you talk about app capabilities and you talk about personal data that you're producing and maybe should get charged for, where is
you
the
should charge
intersection?
them for it, right?
Well,
For the use of it.
sorry. You
And
get
that's a
paid
revenue
for.
earner. Yeah.
You get paid for, yeah. How does trust play into consumer decision making when deciding to track or deciding to buy Apple versus Asus, or deciding to, buy Hermes versus Walmart or Costco? And I know I'm kind of throwing out some hot buttons for you. I'm teasing some things, but how important is trust, and how, with so much deep fake and so much artificial content and so many AI bots now being pushed in between the consumer product good companies and the consumers, how important is trust? And is it trust in the company or trust in the interaction to the company?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that first by saying that very often when I'm doing speaking engagements, I'm in front of 1,000 people, sometimes a few hundreds, but sometimes 5,000. And I always go, when I start, let me ask you a question. How many of you trust your financial institution, your bank, insurance company, to execute a transaction? A deposit, withdrawal from an ATM, wire transfer, every hand goes up. And then I say, now listen very carefully. How many of you trust your financial institution to protect, enhance, and promote your best interests? And at first there's silence and people start looking around and there's murmurs. And then everybody breaks out in absolute hysterical laughter. So there's a difference between, let's call it operational trust, and let's call it best interests trust. Now, the other piece of the answer to that is that, of course, when I have a choice, I'm always going to choose the most trustworthy entity brand in that space. But when they're all mercenaries, what choice do I have? So AT&T or Verizon? So poison or a knife? So that's the difference, that why are people not selecting the most trustworthy entity? Although you see it in Apple, I said the most trustworthy, not the profusely and profoundly trustworthy, right? So why are they choosing the most trustworthy entity? It's because there is a real choice in certain dimensions of trust. But when there is no choice, you're going to choose other dimensions like price or convenience or whatever else. If given a real choice, and my dream is that Apple will become a fiduciary. I just read about Nemo Claw, and that it's going to also use on-device AI, blah, 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 or separate the data so it's on a device or in a safe space, same way that Apple obviously claims that they're going to have on-device AI, never leaves your data, never goes to the cloud, blah, blah, blah. So I think that there will be a growing movement towards people realizing how valuable their data is, especially now that the LLMs are running out of data, and now they're using slop and synthetic data to train, right? But all of our data is sitting there, right? All our personal data, financial data, medical data. Thank God there's some protections. At some point, I believe that we will, going back to the previous theme, we will have all of our data in one place and space, and the AI will act upon that data. The agentic agents will act upon that data, giving me recommendations that serve my best interests. And if I want to not sell, but lease or license the use of that data for a specific moment in time, for a specific purpose, and I accept that, we are all going to have to get paid for that. It's not just the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal who are going to have leverage. There may even be in the future unions that you join, because the quality of your data that you produce may be a richer level of your data that somebody else produces. And so you get to have, for whatever reason, maybe you produce more white papers, maybe you produce some kind of writing, maybe you're just a big talker, but you give away all your secrets. I don't know. But there will be some kind of commerce. And just as Newton says, Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I'm not the only genius, and you're not the only geniuses thinking that data is incredibly valuable, and that personal data, because economies run on personal consumption a great deal, is going to be tremendously valuable, and that maybe the data of people who consume more is even more valuable. But somehow or other, I believe that is going to be one of the greatest revenue generators for individuals in the future.
I have a question for you there.
Please.
Okay, so you're right. I mean, data is definitely paramount. I mean, Reuters recently has been reporting, and we're talking about just in the last little bit, how the U.S. is pushing its diplomats to resist foreign data sovereignty rules that could constrain United States tech companies' handling of data for AI services. So this has now reached the political and the international political level. You're talking about people being paid for their data, but that's not what's going on now. In fact, right now you have the wealthy, you have the wealthy that are able to buy their privacy, whereas the average person is really having to be forced to pay with their data. So how does that transition happen, and how is it that the quote unquote tech oligarchy yields that control?
Well, there's a lot of court cases, for one, that are occurring right now. It's also a technological, let's say, solution. Tim Berners-Lee right now is trying to, I didn't invest in Interrupt, but he's trying hard to make up for his original sin, which is to let the place go AWOL. So he has something called Interrupt, where he's trying to create your own pods and your own analytics. And, and there are others. I've invested in several of them, to my great disappointment. So I think that because there's money in it, guys, there will be some entrepreneurs who will start carving out little places and spaces, and some of them will be mercenaries. Like I've had a lot of startups come and say, look, people's genetic data, 23andMe and the Ancestry shouldn't have control of it. Let's go create people's data. But then they say, but we're taking 80% of the money when we get their genetic data, and they're going to get 20. I didn't invest in that company. But I think there's enough entrepreneurship that you can. So there were so many inventions that have come and gone. People couldn't fathom unions, labor unions at a point in time, but somehow society was in such a state that they began to exist. And then they began to disappear. So if you believe in complexity theory like I do, and I think you do, chaos theory says that complex adaptive systems are constantly evolving. There's emergence. And so we can't judge the future by today. Look at baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. So can we confirm or deny that we were the peace generation when we were young? Can we confirm or deny that we were the sustainability, environmental generation when we were young? And where the are we now? So when people go, Gen Zs are this, millennials are that, I go, just wait, okay? Let's not render a verdict just yet. So yes, you're right. We're at a state right now that is not optimal, but there have been times when the shift occurs. And you know how they say things happen slowly and then suddenly? I'm a believer that there will be some homeostasis, some back to the balance. It will never be perfect. So let's dismiss those, that, nirvana thought, but that there are cycles. History never repeats itself, but it does rhyme. And so I think there are cycles, and whether it's luck, again, accident, non-controllable factors, or controllable factors that create some kind of movement, like the civil rights movement, right? Back in the age of slavery, nobody would have said, not even in the North, because I found out the other day by asking AI that all of the major universities in America were all funded by slave money, even the ones in the North. And that I read something that even the kids in Princeton University at the time were mostly the children, 80% at Princeton were the children of slave owners, and that it was mostly slave money. You could never have told those people back then who were under slavery that there would be some semblance of freedom someday. And I'm telling you that someday, and I hope we don't have to wait in many, there will be a new commercial system that will probably take your data into account and that will value you, and you probably make several thousands of dollars a year on your data. Because if there's a farmer in Peru who has this genetic makeup that helps to improve longevity, it's just a breakthrough in longevity, I don't want that person to be exploited. I want him to get paid what he deserves. So right now, medical companies are using our genetic data and our medical data to develop new drugs. And that's great. I want a piece of that.
But doesn't that risk profiteering by the oligarchy? So Jason had brought up oligarchs, and I'm going to come back to this because when you look at Apple, and Apple's a great example. So I don't know if you know the book, The Sphere.
Yes.
Not the, not The Sphere, The Circle. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay. That one I know.
A little
better.
Michael Crichton-y there. I happen to love The Sphere, but The Circle, if you play that out, the idea is in The Circle that there's a company, and it's effectively Apple, right? I mean, or I don't know if it's supposed to be Google, but I think it's Apple, especially since they're now coming out with a wearable camera sensor AI thing, which is exactly what they did in The Circle. If you have a company like Apple that is so sprawling in terms of access and devices, and they gather so much information, but they do it under the pretense that it's all for your own good and it's all secure. We don't leak it, we don't share it, we don't do anything with it. We'll ignore Fapgate that happened when people used a third-party exploit to get into an API to steal everybody's nude photos. But outside of that, Apple's got a pretty good service record, right?
Right. But again, Backlash took that out, right?
But yes,
they said they had a good intent to find pedophiles, but then they realized, and everybody, that it's a violation of my rights, whoever's rights, right?
But they still do that, by the way. And I think they have to. But here's my question. So let's say Apple starts paying people for their data, the folks that you said were deserving of earning money off of that data that they're producing. But now Apple has all of that data that they've paid for. So the individual is satisfied. They've got their money. But then everybody that wants to do research or development or education or third parties, anybody else now has to pay whatever Apple wants to charge to get access to the massive information that they now have. Yeah. So 2 questions.
I don't buy that scenario.
What about the rights of the individual and their data that's now part of the collective? And are we going to see antitrust and anti-monopoly laws applied against the oligarchs that own the data and the models that are harvesting all of this information, even if the individuals are getting paid for it?
No, I think what will happen, I don't believe in that scenario, first of all, because you own your data. You're aware, right, that you own your data, that you can go to Google Takeout and download all your data. And
well, because they're not paying me for it.
Well, hold on. Because you have perpetually licensed your data. Whenever the terms of service are never written as, we now own your data, you have basically given us your data, because if they did that, the liability on those people would be tremendous. So what they say is just go look up the terms of service of Meta. I have done that, by the way. I have put a deck together on that. You own your data, and you will always own your data. We are licensing it in perpetuity for our use. That's the part that we need to cut off and then replace that with you own your data, and you will have a choice as to whom, where, how you will release whatever data you deem for whatever purpose, and you will be compensated for that. And there will be lawyers. Thank God for America. Look, we have so many checks and balances in America. I always tell people this is the worst country in the world, except for all the other hundreds of countries, except for everybody else. So crazy America somehow has great resilience and agility because it has checks and balances. There are going to be an army of lawyers, and I know a lot of them, who are going to fight for your digital rights. And there's going to be another army of lawyers on the other side fighting to make sure you don't have any rights. But because, in my opinion, of the greed factor, there will still be people who will represent you on your digital rights side, and they'll take a cut, just like the other guys are taking a cut too. So I just love the fact that there are enough people in the mix that you will have. So it'll be like this. It'll be Apple will allow you to have your personal pod and run your AI, but that data always belongs to you. And if Apple is really smart, they're going to say, we're going to be your fiduciary. We protect, enhance, and promote your best data interests. There's a whole bunch of companies out there who want you. Here's the list. Do you want to hear? And of course, you could have lawyers and advisors. To whom do you want to license your data, and for what purpose, and for how much? And I believe there will be a marketplace, and that, the market will determine the value of data. Genetic data for the purposes of doing research to develop a drug or a cure will be far more expensive because the drug companies are sure going to make a lot of money. And my representatives. So let me give you a crazy example. Did you ever imagine that athletes were going to make money at college and even basketball level? Hell no. You didn't think that was possible in your lifetime, did you? But here we are, right? The college coaches are making $12 million a year, and the kids are making even more sometimes, not everybody. And they're trying to figure it out right now. Did you ever imagine that you'd be betting on whether somebody got killed or not in Iran through prediction markets? So there's a lot of innovation. Fortunately, some of it is good. So I do believe that you will take control of your data. It will serve first your purposes to give you better recommendations, live a better life, etc. But that data, anonymized, by the way, anonymized in the aggregate, could be the fuel for new innovations in medicine, in business, anonymized data, because there's something called zero knowledge proofs, and I think you all know what they are, right? Where I could make a request to a company. They don't know who I am, but they know I'm a male, let's say described as a demographic. They know that I have a valid credit card. They know that I have valid insurance and that I can pay for that car. And I can buy that, if you will, anonymously in the future. I believe that's coming. So I think there's going to be a lot of great innovations. Just like, when I lived in Kansas one time, I was working for Colgate-Palmolive, and I went there and I said, so you're the Bible region, you're the Bible states, right? He goes, yeah. And that's why we got so many devil worshipers too. So for every action, there's a reaction, guys. And I have the faith that we will swing in a different direction and then reach some kind of homeostasis, and that data marketplaces will. I almost tried to invest in one, but then the entrepreneur got too greedy. I wanted to create a data exchange. Okay.
This is interesting because it's predicated upon people caring. Now, let me tell you what I'm talking about here. You talked a little bit about UBI and it not being something that was viable because it took away people's dignity. I can think of a whole lot of people that I know personally that would say, dignity schmignity, give me a UBI so that I can go and sit on the beach and drink pina coladas. I'm kind of wondering if data, personal data, yes, compensation is one thing, but can you make them care enough to actually take their data out into some sort of a market and try and sell it?
I don't think they have to care. I think their intermediaries and fiduciaries have to care. They just have to care about the money, as you just described. But there will be somebody taking care of that, of all those mechanisms to make it very friction-free, and you're collecting the money.
But now you're talking about the politicization of the fiduciary. Because if we're talking about things at that size of a scale, there's going to be all sorts of political elements in there. I mean, and we're dealing with a hard enough time with the political parties, for crying out loud, let alone with multiple competing fiduciaries that could be using our data and
Yes.
brokering our data.
My answer to that is that I think the politicization of this is all about money. So to the degree that there are incentives, and that's Adam Smith, right? Adam Smith actually believed in morality, but he also believed in that the self-interest, and it's defined in many different ways, in many different times, drives you to do certain things. And once we have data in a pod, and once we have AI making decisions, and some genius is going to say, oh my God, all that data and all those pods has now been aggregated for all these gentlemen, all these individuals. What do we do with that data? And then somebody's going to go to left field, ideas that were invented 30 years ago, but now it's like, oh my God, you know what we're going to do? Some entrepreneur is going to say, and some venture capital is going to say, and we're off to the races with data fiduciaries. And are they going to be perfect? No, but I think there will be a commercialization, an economic output of that massive magnitude, because we're going to want to feed the AI. And I think we're going to invent many other things to do as humans. I just don't, the lack of imagination right now, the articles I read from all these, all these, how do I call them, pessimists, is really amazing to me. Like the lack of imagination and the dire, and let's face it, we're all trying to get headlines. And so some people love to get headlines by scaring the crap out of people. And other people get headlines by being, probably optimists like me. So, but somewhere in the middle is reality. So I'm not too concerned about politicizing this, because everything is politicized, right?
Well,
I
you
mean, that's
had me
fair.
at Adam Smith, man, because all I'm hearing you say is economics is not a dismal science. And anyone who thinks economics is a dismal science needs to go back to school. Anyway, I'm sorry, Matt, didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I love that insert. So Milton, I'm going to ask you to put on your future looking glasses here for a second, because yeah, I really like the Luxury Institute's work. I love the new Relationship Mastery Index and the concept of all of the pillars of it. When we look at things in the future, if I create a digital twin of myself and I sell that digital twin or license it to an oligarch, who then allows me as a fiduciary to select where I want my digital twin to be used in marketing and consumer products and research and development and healthcare sciences and education. Do these big high-end retailers now need to start marketing to the digital avatars? Or do they still need to appeal to the individuals who are sitting at home and just licensing their digital versions of themselves into the ether? Is it going to be a whole subculture, like an actual Second Life, instead of that awful 8-bit version that we all remember from the late 90s and early 2000s, except it's not only fully autonomous, but it's all us, just our digital versions. And that's where all commerce takes place now. That's where all retail transactions, that's where all marketing happens. What do you think? Is that where we're headed?
So I think that the human will be in the loop big time, because I don't think we're going to delegate decisions on our consumption and lifestyle to avatars, digital twins, or anything. But we are going to use personal agents who I hope will, again, be our fiduciaries, right? Be looking out after our own interests. My theory is that a lot of products that become commodified, because if and I've tested this. So I went to AI and I said I use Claude, Gemini, whatever suits me, right? But mostly Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. Not Perplexity anymore. For some reason, I don't like those people. And so there you go. I don't trust them. So I think what's going to happen when I made this query in the current state, I said, find me a linen shirt, size X, medium, light pink, and get me best quality, best price. And it came back and gave me 10 options. I did not deal with any of those retailers directly. When your agentic AI gets even better at that, it knows you, it really has dimensionalized your demand needs. I'm not even going to talk to retailers if I can help it. I'll tell you right now, I'm a member at Costco, and I'm so sick of going to Costco and having to park and having to wait. And I don't consume that much. So like, I only go there twice a year. If I didn't have to go at all, and I could just tell my AI, look, just find me the best quality toilet paper and the best quality paper towels. I don't care what brand it is. So I think it really commoditizes a lot of products, clothing, apparel, a lot of products. And so some people have the theory, and I adhere to that. There will be probably truly craftswoman-made products, superb quality, and fucking commodities. Okay. And those commodities are just going to compete on price. And the contract manufacturers are going to go, we don't need Costco. We can go direct to the consumer. Because, and think about contract manufacturers. Like, contract manufacturers make for all the CPG brands, and then they make for all these entrepreneurs, and then they make for the retailers, right? But it's all the same ingredients and the same formulas. It's the same vitamin, whatever, the same, supplement, the same cookie. So it's already commoditized, but there's this layer of useless intermediaries. To me, AI is going to eliminate a lot of those intermediaries, and we're going to go directly to the manufacturer, who's also going to be using AI. And if the agents are doing their job, we're going to find that beautiful pink linen shirt at maybe my parameters, $100 to $150. I like to spend. Or it'll say, Milton, you dummy, you can get the best quality for $50. It's on sale right now. And I won't give a darn about those brands. I really think that's what's going to happen. And so that's going to really commodify a lot of products and services. I also know that the processes that AI is going to create are also going to be commodified, which is why, Matt, going back to, it's the people that matter. To me, there are two things that matter most in this AI world: the data and the people. Everything else to me is a freaking commodity. And I know that's a very strong statement. I'm leaving out the craftspeople who make the handbags, one a day for Hermes. But at the, let's call it in the bell curve, at the fat part of the bell curve, commodity rules. And we as consumers benefit. So do the manufacturers of those, right?
So I want you to know that if it's the people and the data and everything else is a commodity, then I am going to get my jet and I am going to get my yacht, because they're going to be
If you're a great
commoditized.
relationship builder, yes, you will.
I will
Because
do
that's
my
the
very
other
best.
piece. Because it's the people with the cognitive and the emotional skills. And that's why we created the Relationship Mastery Index. Because if AI is the yin, relationships are the yang. Human relationships are the yang. And that means that we all have to become better at, and I got this data from Wealth and Consumers over 23 years. When we ask them, what do you require as behaviors in order to buy again, and build a long-term relationship with any provider, with any brand ambassador? It's trustworthiness, expertise. So trustworthiness, emotional, expertise in the domain, cognitive, empathy, emotional, kindness, emotional, and creativity, cognitive. I didn't make those up. That's what they continually tell us they require. Now, I learned that in the luxury industry, but I know it's universal. I know those are universal traits, behaviors, which, unlike your personality test that says you're an introvert, you're an extrovert, you're a thinker, you're a feeler, you still have to earn trust. I don't care if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Trustworthiness matters. Expertise matters. Empathy matters. Kindness matters. And a lot of people are always surprised that kindness matters in business. Okay. And creativity matters. And it's not creativity like Einstein or Picasso. It's the ability to take whatever resources you have, including your own, your peers, like in the car dealer, the test drive, the car, the financing, the service component, and create an extraordinary experience. And so there's where I think the differentiator is in the brand ambassadors. And I know that some companies won't have ambassadors, they'll have bots. And I think that for some low-level commodities, who cares if a person gives me, I don't talk to anyone at Amazon, right? Just buy me, except that my bot is going to go in there, my agent is going to go in there, find the best price, and not from some Chinese company that's selling junk because Amazon allowed them to. So hopefully the agentic AI that is personal will be a great filter into life and will help sort of be the sheriff that preserves the best interests of every individual. I know that's idealistic. And I do believe that it does help eradicate poverty, because we are going to have to scale many of the services and the goods and the practices that we have across the world. And I think that's where AI is going to help. That you're diagnosing MRIs now like that. Okay, well then make them available to the 8 billion people who don't have it right now. And I think there will be a business in that.
So what I'm hearing, I frankly, I like what I'm hearing, but I just want to kind of create a summary on this because we talked about a lot of things in a lot of different areas. We're going to hopefully see AI give us greater accessibility to necessary services across the world. We're going to see an opportunity for the every Joe, every person to potentially be able to monetize their information, their data through fiduciaries that you can actually trust with your information under these licenses that will then allow you to control where that information is resold or sublicensed to.
Yeah, I would say license, always license.
And it's also going to create an opportunity in retail and consumer products to cut out some of the intermediaries, because agents will learn you and know you and be able to help you find things without necessarily going through traditional retail channels. But even with all of that,
For many things, for many products and
for many
services.
things.
Yeah.
But even with all of that, humans still essential, human trustworthiness still essential, interpersonal relationships still essential, because all of that's happening in the digital world, and the real world will still very much exist and function as it does today, just with greater benefits and hopefully with more accessibility to services and maybe even more revenue streams for more people. Is that a good summary?
I couldn't have said it better, Matt. You should have done this interview.
I mean, you gave me the content. I just kind of digested
Yes,
it
and those are
brought it
not
back.
my original ideas. I do a lot of research, and I know that there are a lot of great people working on this, and that's what gives me the faith. If this was the genius of Milton Pedraza, oh my God. No, I work with a lot of people who are investors and innovators, and some of them are very wealthy and they have the best, intent, and they're investing in these things. So that's why I have faith. If it was just in my brain, I would like, oh, shit, we're in trouble. But it's a very pervasive, I would say, movement. And I think it will catch on. And I think people do care more than we think. It's just that we've been dumbed down by the fact that we can't do anything about a lot of things. But I promise you, I think even the poorest people, and I grew up poor, are very cognizant and aware of what's going on. It's just that they have learned helplessness. But if you wake some of that up, like a Rosa Parks, they will get going and do bold things. And all it takes is a few bold people to do good things. And we're going to get going on this. I really believe that.
Well, I will say this. Relationships are very important, and this is a relationship that I am very glad to have made with you, Milton. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I think we've had a pretty wide and varied discussion from a lot of different angles that has made me ponder a few things, and I'm sure that those that are listening are probably pondering a few things as well. So
thank you.
Thank you for being on. For those of you that are listening, we will be back with another episode as soon as we can. So on behalf of Matt Conweiser, myself, and our guest, Milton Pedraza, thank you for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all.